Everybody, welcome back to the Financial Freedom Show. My name is Rob Berger. This is the live Q&A, and I'm just looking at the chat. It's like there's already questions and people tagging me. It's like I'm already behind, and we just started. I'm already feeling overwhelmed. If someone can give me a thumbs up in the chat to let me know that you can see and hear me, that would be great. As I'll just assume for the moment that you can, and I'm going to go through a couple of quick announcements. Thanks, Sean. Yep, good. Appreciate it. A couple of quick announcements, and then we'll get right into it. The first is this show, and this may be the way we do it going forward. It's all about you. So I didn't come, in the past, I've come with sort of my own topics to discuss at the beginning. It takes away time from the chat. So it's all chat. I did go through last week's chat for questions that I missed, and there were a lot of them. So I've got those. We'll cover those as I promised. And then we'll get into your questions. As I see some of you already doing, if you want to ask me a question, doesn't have to be a question, just be a topic. Rob, talk about Big Ten football, whatever the topic is. Just tag me because it's orange, shows up. If I'm not tagged, I skip through it. So that's it. That's what we're going to do. And then at the end, after a couple of hours, I usually do a few chess problems. It's kind of funny when people join live, but they join when we're doing the chess problems. They're absolutely baffled and totally confused with what's going on in the world. Okay, a few other quick things. The first one is my mom was a teacher. She still a substitute teaches. A lot of English as a second language, English. And she is now an author. She's written books. She's written several children's books. Here they are. It's Anastasia's the main character, Anastasia Bucknell. And the stories, some of her cousins are sort of the real people, if you will, behind these characters. One of them was named Anne, who unfortunately passed away many years ago, but she's sort of the inspiration for Anastasia. And what I love about these books, among other things, is they're not just to entertain children, but to teach. According to Amazon, they're for 8 to 10-year-olds. I don't know. I guess that's right. Her latest one is this one here, Anastasia Meets Jackie Robinson, a great book. And we're from Ohio. I don't live there now, but we're from Ohio. And there is a connection. If you watch the movie and you know who Branch Rickey is, he recruited Jackie Robinson and was from Portsmouth, Ohio, which is on the Ohio River, I guess, a bit east of Cincinnati. He also played for the Shelby Blues. Did you know that? Shelby's in the northern part of the state. Anyway, great gifts. I think the kids of this age will love them. And so I'm just promoting my mom because I think she's doing good stuff. The second thing is this, and you're like, Rob, what is that? So we're going to dedicate today's Q&A to my bad back because on Sunday I tweaked it, lifting a kettlebell, and I've been hobbling around, and I'm even hooked up right now. Here's what it looks like. Hang on to this thing. Can you see it? Maybe you can see it. It's got wires that then go to my back. And if you turn it up, it zaps your back. Actually feels good. Anyway, I've had a bad back for 30 years. It's much, much better since I now work out. But every now and again, it gives me trouble. And I use this thing. And I thought, I don't know. It's the holidays. This is it's a stem. If you go to a physical therapist, they'll hook you up to sort of an industrial grade version of this and set your hair on fire if you want. But actually, this thing is a lifesaver. My wife and I had one we used for like 15 years, and it wore out. We just bought this one just a week ago. It's only like $30. What is it? $32.91. Might be a good gift if you know someone with a bad back. It has been a lifesaver for me. The final thing I'll mention before we dive into the questions, and it's funny, I just got this email. So, I have advertisers, not so much for the podcast, but for my websites, but I have advertisers for links below the videos from time to time. One of my advertisers is Quicken, but I've never, ever promoted Quicken, not for any reason. I used Quicken for years back in the day. I just haven't. I've never made a nickel off of Quicken. But just before this podcast or this Q&A started, I got an email from them saying, hey, we've got a 40% sale. Here's your affiliate link. You can share it with whoever. And I thought, well, I don't know. I'll drop it below the video. I don't even know what I make from it. But what I do know is it doesn't cost you anything extra. And here's what the page looks like. So I don't know. If you're a Quicken person, I don't really use Quicken anymore. I used it way back in the day, but I thought I'd mention it. They're running this 40% off. They also have 25% off on Simplify, which is their sort of mobile app. I think it ends towards the end of the month. Anyway, I don't know. If it's of interest to you, there it is. All right, so that's it. One final thing. I mentioned I was looking for writers, and some folks have reached out to me. That's great. To turn some of these videos into articles. I'm also looking for writers for my All Cards site who just love credit cards and banking and personal finance and like to write about it. So it could be a credit card review or comparison. It could be a bank review. It could be I don't know, how to improve your credit score kind of article, how to get out of debt. If that kind of stuff is of interest to you and you like writing and you have a good attention to detail, love to hear from you. Looking for writers. All right, now let's get to, we're going to first go through last week's chats that I missed. And the first one, actually two folks asked this. One was Rothman, and he or she said, I just became a first-time home buyer. Congrats. 200,000 with 5% down and 30-year mortgage at 3.125%. My question is whether I should focus at all on paying down the mortgage early or just invest. And then Mike, a different viewer, said kind of the same question. My wife and I have 401ks, TSPs, and some side mutual funds. We have a lot of cash on the side due to market valuations to pay off 200,000 mortgage at 3.5% or keep it in reserve. So this question gets asked a gazillion times a day. The reason it keeps getting asked is because there's no one right answer to it. By the way, even if you have a very strong opinion for yourself about how you should handle this, should you pay off your mortgage early or invest, it's still not a black and white question. And so I will share with you my thoughts on it, how we thought about it. Eventually, we did pay our mortgage off early. But we went through a lot of other things first. So number one, before I would even consider paying anything extra on a mortgage, whether it's a lump sum to pay it off or pay extra each month, there are certain, in my view, financial priorities, financial goals that are more important than paying off a mortgage early or in advance. So what are they? One, paying off all other debts. And that can include student loans, car loans, obviously credit cards. And you'll see that a lot. If you just Google this question, that comes up a lot. And it just makes sense because usually the mortgage is the cheapest debt. You know, there certainly could be exceptions to that, and you could have 0% balance transfer credit cards or something like that. But by and large, it's the cheapest or one of the cheapest debts that you have. It's also, I think for most people, the largest one. So it's going to take a lot longer to pay it off. But that's the first thing. I think you just get rid of all your other debts first. The second thing, I don't hear people talk about this as much, is it's not just about paying off your debt. I want to make sure I'm positioned so that I won't go into more debt down the road. And I think the best example of this is a car. So, if I just paid off my car, and let's say that was my last debt, I wouldn't rush into paying off my mortgage until I knew how I was going to pay for my next car. So maybe I'm going to get a new car, whatever, 5 years from now. Do I have the cash, or can I save the cash between now and then so that I don't have to finance the car? Or it could be, child's wedding or whatever. So I want to make sure that I've got any cash needs, beyond just the normal day-to-day stuff covered. At least I would say probably the next 5 years, but your mileage may vary. All right. I obviously want to have fully funded 401k and IRAs before I'm paying off my mortgage early. If I'm funding 529s or otherwise saving for a child's education, I want that fully funded. And for me, I want at least, once all that's done, I want at least a year's worth of expenses in some sort of liquid form. I mean, it could be part of a taxable investment account with some of it in cash for emergencies. Not necessarily that the whole 1 year worth of expenses has to be in a savings account, but I want access to that kind of money. I'm very, sensitive to having liquidity. So that's just the starting point. All of those things to me are things that have to come before you start paying off your mortgage early. And then I do factor in taxes, right? So obviously a mortgage, there's some exceptions, but generally your mortgage interest is deductible. Whether that's of an advantage to you depends. I mean, with the tax changes in, what was it, 2017, I think, we limited the SALT, state and local tax deductions. We limited that to 10 grand. we increase the standard deduction. So for some folks, they may not get much of a tax benefit from the mortgage interest. Others do. That is a relevant consideration, and it's not so much that you keep a mortgage because there's a tax advantage. That's not how I think about it. If there's a tax advantage for you because of your mortgage, the net effect of that is it lowers the after-tax interest rate. That's how I think of it. And but that's certainly relevant to the consideration because it's relevant to what the cost of this loan is. So you want to think about the taxes. So once you've done all of that, then a couple of things. So the first analysis is often, well, long-term stocks pay, let's call it 10%. And that's certainly more than a mortgage today. And so, if I'm going to put this in, say, an S&P 500, won't I be better off doing that rather than paying the mortgage early? The short answer is if you're just focused on the math, yeah, assuming, that long-term historical trends go forward into the future, even if it's not 10%, let's just say, it's 7%, you are going to be better off investing it long-term. The problem is we're really comparing apples and oranges. We're comparing a very volatile, high-risk investment with paying off a mortgage, which is basically a zero-risk investment. Now, again, one could say, yes, in the short term, stocks are risky, but over the long term, that risk sort of dynamic changes. And I suppose there's some truth to that. But it's almost like saying, well, what should I invest in, stocks or bonds? Well, they're two totally different kinds of investments. And in the case of a mortgage, it's even probably less risky than a bond, right? Because it's almost a guaranteed you're going to save whatever interest you don't pay because you paid the mortgage early. So I think there's some value in comparing, say the cost of your mortgage to what you think you can earn long term. But we shouldn't do that without at least recognizing that they're two totally different kinds of investments. All right. The other thing I'll say on stocks and mortgages and comparing them, I'm not a believer at all in investing on margin at all. I don't borrow to invest at all. And I've heard some say, well, if you don't pay off your mortgage when you can, and instead you invest the money, it's the same thing. And it's really not the same thing. I mean, I understand the argument. You've got this debt that you could retire, and instead you're taking money and investing it. But it's very, very different than investing on margin in a couple of ways. The first is when you invest on margin, of course, if the market tanks, you could be subject to a margin call, right, where you've got to pay the money back. That's obviously doesn't apply to a mortgage. And in that sense, a mortgage is long-term, sort of predictable debt, right? So that's the first thing. I think the second thing, though, is there's a psychology behind it. When someone wants to borrow money to invest, to me, they're trying to take a shortcut to achieving some goal. And I think it can blow up in their face. And we see it every time the cycles crash. When we're in a bull market, it's almost always the case that there's tremendous leverage in the system. And, when everything blows up, and eventually it does, the folks that are highly leveraged get really, really burned. And so there's a psychology behind it that I think is not consistent with building long-term wealth. When you go to borrow money to buy a home, it's totally different. You're obviously not trying to invest the money. You're buying something that you need to live in. It's just totally different. Now, obviously, real estate investing, a whole nother topic, but we're talking about the primary mortgage on your home. So that's stocks versus a mortgage. What's interesting to me is comparing paying off your mortgage early with bonds. And there certainly are some similarities, but we're looking at what, 3.5%. They were both. So Rothman was at 3.125. Mike's at 3.5%. I mean, that's basically that's beating bonds today. At least if you think about it from paying off the mortgage is a guaranteed return, right? There's no interest rate risk, so to speak. There's no credit risk as there is with investing in, say, high yield bonds or emerging market debt. And hang on, my back. There we go. It's off. Someone that just joined is like, what's Rob plugged into? But here's the other thing that's interesting when you compare bond investing with mortgages. mortgages, and that is some argue that having a mortgage today is a hedge on inflation. The theory being, you've got these low 3.5%, 3.125% mortgages. If inflation really isn't transitory, if it keeps going up and the Fed has to hit the brakes and interest rates go up, you've got this locked in loan at a very, very low interest rate. And if, imagine getting 5% on savings accounts. Well, you'd love to have that mortgage. If we could get 5% on savings accounts, even factoring in taxes, I don't think why pay off your mortgage early? You just stick all the money in an FDIC insured account, right? So some see it as a hedge against inflation, which I'll be honest, even though we don't have a mortgage, we're not going to go out and get one. I guess we could get a cash out refi. We're not going to do that. That kind of appeals to me. I'll be honest. Now, so that's, I think something else to consider. Two other things. I know this has kind of been a long answer, but I think there's a lot of factors to think about. One is your stage in life. Are you near retirement? Because psychological factors come into play, and I think they're important. We all know the math. We all know long-term S&P 500 is probably going to do better than 3%. But there's psychological factors, and paying off a mortgage and not having that debt, I can speak from experience, feels pretty good. And I don't think that's to be ignored. I wouldn't be totally ruled by that. I would try to do the math too. But I think it's particularly relevant as you're nearing retirement. If you can get out of all debt as you enter retirement, that's a good position to be in. I wouldn't sacrifice liquidity. I wouldn't sacrifice the other priorities I mentioned to achieve it. But if you've satisfied all of that, I wouldn't be dismissive of the benefits of feeling good that you're debt free. And the final thing I'll say is it's not all or nothing. When we paid off our mortgage, we didn't do it all at once. We started paying off in chunks because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So you throw a little money at it. Then 6 months or a year later, we've got some extra money. We paid a little more. And then eventually it came to where we finally made one big check and it was all done. So I know that's sort of a long answer to what might be somewhat of a simple question. I don't know, but that's my take on it. I'm going to jump to the chat for just a second. See if anyone's saying, Rob, you're an idiot. That's the dumbest response to that question I've ever heard. Well, so far you guys are being kind. Okay, next one. This is from Dan. You were going to come back to Wellington. Do you have time for it in this session? He asked that last session. In this session, yeah, I do. We're going to go over Wellington real quick. So here it is. This is the Vanguard site. See, and when I turn on my screen like this, it allows me to drink coffee without you guys seeing me. Okay. So what is, and that's Wellesley, not Wellington. Aren't I smart? See, got the wrong one up there. You did ask about Wellington, right? Yeah. That's okay. I'm bringing it up. Here we go. Okay. Wellington. So Wellington is an interesting fund. It's the oldest mutual fund, I think, in existence. It was launched a year before, I believe, the stock market crash of 1929. And they actually say founded in 1929, which is on the Vanguard website. I've heard maybe the paperwork was put together in 28. I think it was launched a couple of months before the stock market crash. In any event, it's old. That's the first thing to know about it. It's an actively managed fund. So keep that in mind. This is not an index fund, which obviously Vanguard is well known for. And it has two share classes. We're looking at what's called the Admiral shares. You see that here. It also has an investor share. I'll open this up in a separate window. What's the difference? Well, Admiral share is cheaper, 16 bips, 16 basis points versus 24 basis points for the investor share. And I know you're thinking, well, Rob, why would I pay more? Well, the minimum investment's different. It's 50 grand for the Admiral shares. It's 3 grand, I think. Yeah, 3 grand for the investor shares. That actually used to be how Vanguard handled a lot of their funds. Now, for most funds, like the index funds, I think they're all basically Admiral shares with the same 3,000 minimum investment, maybe 1,000 if it's in an IRA, perhaps. But this one still has that difference. Of course, if you're going to use this as part of a retirement portfolio, you've probably, can handle the minimum investment, but it's worth pointing out, it's 50 grand. for the Admiral shares. And the asset allocation is 65% stocks, 35% bonds, roughly. Let's actually look it up here. Yeah. So right here, 66.5 stocks, 33, 34 in bonds and reserves. So it is, they would call this a balanced fund. A balanced fund is just a fund that invests in both stocks and bonds. And so this is probably the best known balanced fund out there. It has excellent diversity. I can show you that. Let me pull it up here. If we go to the portfolio, this is in Morningstar. And I'm going to go down to the bottom here. Here's their top 10 holdings. It's interesting. They've got 68 equity holdings, which may concern some. It doesn't me. It probably maps pretty well to the S&P 500, just looking at their portfolio. We'll talk about their strategy in a minute. That's still a lot of diversity. And you can see they've got about 1,100 bond holdings. And if you looked at them, a lot of treasuries. They've only got one listed here. But if we go up to the top again, we can see, by the way, if you're using the portfolio tool, so I've gone to Vanguard, I've typed in the ticker symbol up here. You get brought to this quote page to begin with, right? I'm just showing you this so you know how I got here. And you go over to portfolio. Now, this portfolio here is different than this portfolio up here. This portfolio link is where you can go and actually create your own portfolio and it'll track it. I've shown you that in past videos. Here, what they mean by portfolio is the portfolio of this particular fund. And the thing that I want to point out to you, because this is easy to miss, when you're dealing with a fund that owns both stocks and bonds, or equities and bonds, you'll see this right here. And you have to toggle between the two. So at the moment, we're looking at their equity, US equity, non-US equity. This is the style box. So it's large cap blend, meaning it's large companies and it's a blend of value and growth. If you click over to bonds, then you get to see their bond information here, their effective duration. We've talked about that. Credit risk is in the middle. So if we come down here, we can see that they invest in investment grade bonds or better. I guess they're all investment grade, but BBB and better, I guess is what I meant to say, which is all investment grade. Interesting. I haven't noticed this coupon range. Oh. Anyway, so that's sort of the fund. Now, the question is, if it's not an index fund, how does it pick its stocks? I pulled this for, actually, I can just show you on the screen. And that way you know how to do this yourself. So this is back to Vanguard. We're in their Wellington fund, Admiral shares. And I've gone, you start over here in overview. And I went over to portfolio and management, which is where you get things like their own view. Now, a couple of things. They view this as a value fund, as we'll see. And that's why they're sort of using this Morningstar type style box. They say large value. When you go to Morningstar, they're like, I'll go back over to equity. They're like, nah, it's more of a large blend. And if you look at their price earnings, according to Morningstar anyway, I tend to agree with Morningstar on this. So I'm not sure, maybe prices have just gone up so much that what was once a value stock and fund has now become more of a blend. But in any event, this is what I wanted to show you, this strategy and policy link. If you click it, you get some information on how they invest. And I just want to focus just on the top paragraph. It says the fund invests in 60 to 70% of its assets in dividend paying and to a lesser extent non-dividend paying common stocks of established medium and large companies. The advisor seeks those that appear undervalued but have prospects for improvement. So they're commonly referred to as value stocks. And we saw, maybe it's not so much value anymore, but that's their approach. And then they say the remaining 30 to 40% of the fund is mainly invested in, and we saw this in Morningstar, investment grade corporate bonds with some exposure to US treasuries and government agency bonds. I'm guessing that's mortgage-backed securities. Oh, well, no, here, mortgage-backed securities. Okay. So there you go. That's sort of their strategy, their approach in a nutshell. And their dividend yield is about 1.5% over the last 12 months. So that's sort of the Wellington fund. Now, what do I think about it? Well, I think it has advantages and disadvantages. So some of the pros. Well, I mean, for a balanced fund, it's had excellent performance for a very long time. It's done very well. it's a single fund. So if you're looking to simplify your investing, it would be one way to go to get everything in just one fund. So that's, there's no rebalancing. You don't have to worry about rebalancing between funds. Makes it easy to manage. I think those are all advantages. It's low cost, even for an actively managed fund. 16 basis points, not the cheapest, but still very cheap. So are there disadvantages? Sure. Whenever you've got simplicity, you give up control. So if you put everything in this fund, you've got a 65-35 portfolio. That's it. May or may not be what you want, but that's what you're going to get. It's done well over its long history, but as we know, past performance is no guarantee of future results. So who knows? And it is an actively managed fund. So, you're kind of relying on the management of this fund, making smart decisions. So you got to keep that in mind. And so when you sort of add all that together, what's my take? Well, first of all, if you want to invest in this fund, but you want a slightly different asset allocation, you could do Wellington. I call it Wellington plus one. Let's say you want slightly more stock exposure. Well, you could do most of your money in Wellington and then just enough in a total market or S&P 500 to get the stock bond allocation that you want. Or if you wanted more in bonds, you wanted a 60-40 or 55-45, you could just get a bond fund. So you can get around some of the lack of flexibility of investing in a single fund by just adding one more fund. Or maybe, you're fine with that, but you really want some small cap value exposure or emerging markets. So you could add that fund instead. Obviously, if you start adding all of those, that's where it doesn't make much sense. At that point, why have a balanced fund? It's one thing to add one fund to it to maybe either get some exposure you want or slightly change the asset allocation. But if you start adding a bond fund and a stock fund and then emerging markets and small cap value, it seems kind of pointless to me to own Wellington. Are there alternatives? Sure. If you just want a single fund, Vanguard's life strategy funds are an alternative. Again, they have the same pros and cons. You've got 80-20, 60-40, 100% stocks. You can't dial in the asset allocation you want, but there are certainly reasonable alternatives. So having said all of that, would I put my money in Wellington? I would not. And again, the reason is, one, I'm not comfortable trusting all of my money. Well, to probably any fund, but certainly not an actively managed fund, even with one with a 90-year track record. I could start adding other funds, but then why have Wellington? It just complicates my asset allocation. It makes it more difficult for me to know what my asset allocation is. Not so much with a tool like Personal Capital, because it can just sort of x-ray into your portfolio and give you the exact asset allocation. But in my own brain, having balanced funds kind of messes it up with the spreadsheet that I use. So there you go. All right. Let me just check back to the stream to see if anyone's still watching. There's a few of you. Good. All right. Working through these. Those are the longest two. We're going to get much quicker here. Sasser says, should I take gains from Roth or just my 401k nearing retirement? I'm not sure I like either of those options. So here's, when it comes to the order of withdrawal, the sort of general wisdom is this. You first take any income from taxable accounts, dividends and interest. And then you sell taxable accounts. There's going to be some capital gains, but that's sort of the second thing you take from. Then you take from traditional retirement accounts, and then you take from Roth. That's sort of the general rule of thumb, but there are all kinds of exceptions. So for example, you may be looking at a required minimum distribution, sure, 10 or 15 years from now, but it may be a mountain of you may get, just whammied with taxes. And so you might want to do Roth conversions now, or in some years, to spread the tax liability out and hopefully keep yourself in lower tax brackets. So there are definitely exceptions to the general wisdom. The other exception could be, for a given year, maybe you had some odd income event. I don't know what that might be, but let's just assume you did, and you didn't want to have any more taxable income that year. You might just take from a Roth. There could be year-specific events, either where you want to avoid additional taxable income, or maybe you're willing to take on more. So there are always exceptions. One source or article that I want to show you is this one from Fidelity. And if I remember, I'll put it below the video when we're done. And by the way, I will have timestamps down there as well. I hate the word savvy and money, but in any event, tax savvy withdrawals in retirement. And they talk about this. They actually talk about the general sort of rule of thumb that I mentioned, and they walk through some examples. And they're big proponents on more leveling the taxes out and not taking just from taxable accounts first. And they walk through some analysis that I won't go through in detail, but I think it's certainly a good article to read if this is an issue you're confronting now. The final thing I'll say is there is some software that can help you. New Retirement has some tools. On Trajectory has a really neat tool on this where you can make different assumptions, and it also will optimize it for you and tell you what they think is the best approach. And then you can always talk to an advisor. I use Mark Zorel. I've mentioned him. He's a Plan Vision. I have no financial relationship with him at all. But he uses eMoney Advisor, and I think it goes through an analysis. It can also do an analysis of Roth conversions. All right. Peter says, do value funds make sense in a world where technology is growing exponentially? Would value companies become antiquated if they are replaced by things are typically better and cheaper? No. Okay, next question. All right, maybe I'll have a few comments. First of all, nothing grows exponentially. Well, maybe the universe does. Do we know? I'm not sure. And actually, I'm going to pair his question with another one that I got, which was, if I can find it real quick. Well, I can't, but I'll come to it. Oh, here we go. It's from Recht. How has any of the market crashes you experienced changed your investment sentiments, direction, or did you just stay the course? They're kind of related. So I've always stayed the course. That's true through the tech bubble, the Great Recession, COVID, whatever. But they're kind of related because during the run-up in the 90s, this question was a big issue. Everyone thought technology was the future in terms of investing. And I don't know, those of you that were investing back then, you may recall that Warren Buffett took a lot of heat. I mean, they were like, he's a dinosaur. What's he know? Old guy doesn't understand technology. Still invests in Coca-Cola, for pity's sake. And yeah, he's still around, and people lost their shirts. And they're saying the same thing now, by the way, about Warren Buffett and crypto. I guess we'll see who's right. Don't know. But when you think about a tech company can be a value company. Right? I mean, when you talk about value, all it means is it's price related to its value based on some fundamental analysis, right? Tech companies tend to not be value companies because people tend to pay more for them because they think their growth is off the charts, right? We're willing to pay more because we see a bright future, and that bright future continues until it doesn't. Obviously, technology is, I guess it's the future. It's the present. To some extent, it's the past. I mean, it's not going anywhere as far as we could tell. But the love of growth companies right now will change. We will move back to a value approach, and then eventually that will give way to growth. One of the things, the question to ask is, why are stock valuations where they are? Why are tech companies through the roof? The mistake I think we make is and I think we talked about this last week, we give it this narrative that's true, but it's not the cause. So we give this narrative to Bitcoin. Well, there's only so many they're going to make. It can't be inflated. It can't be controlled by a central bank. There's no middleman. All true, and probably have absolutely nothing to do with its current price. That's the mistake we make. So we can look at technology and say, yeah, technology is the future. Yeah, probably is. And we can just go down a whole line of things about how great technology is. And while that is certainly relevant to the question of valuation, I think at the end of the day, the reason we're seeing the crazy valuations today is because money's cheap and it's abundant. No one knows what to do with it. We're just, so when that changes, I think, we'll rotate back into value. And then that won't last either. We'll eventually rotate back into growth. So yeah, in terms of all the experiences from the other crashes, what I've learned from them is that things change and things don't change. But whatever the investment of the day happens to be, it's technologies, technology stocks, crypto, whatever, this too shall pass. Just the way it works. Vanguard Valuist, do you think it's crazy to be 100% stock with a 5 to 10 year time frame before needing any withdrawals? At 5-year point, max withdrawal rate would be 2.5 to 3%. Well, I personally wouldn't be 100% stocks. Given your withdrawal rate, 2.5 to 3%, at least on some sort of Bengen analysis, you're probably going to be fine for 30 or 40 years. And I would even argue maybe forever, at least based on historical data. If you Google something like permanent withdrawal rate, you find some interesting articles. Permanent withdrawal rate is what percentage can I take out in year one of retirement and then adjust it for inflation so that not only will I not run out of money, but that whatever I started with, we'll just say it's $1 million, whatever I started with, I'll keep that too, and on an inflation adjusted basis. So in other words, how much can I take out so that my nest egg not only doesn't go down, but keeps pace with inflation? And over the long term, that comes in around 3.5%. Now, I don't know what the future holds, but would I be at 100% stocks? No. Do I think you're crazy? No, probably not. Not crazy. But yeah, that's just too rich for me. Kevin asks, what do you think of M1 retirement date funds? So I like them. I don't think I can pull them up. Maybe I can. I'll pull them up real quickly. I just have to sign into my account. There's a caveat to them, though. There's one thing that you just need to know. I'll show them to you. Hang on. I got a two-factor authentication into my account. Here we go. We can. Oh, I got one up right now. Here we go. So this is their. Well, let's go back. Let's actually go back to their expert pies. So if you're in M1 Finance, you're going to go to research, and then you can go to any pies you've created. These are the expert pies, and one of them is plan for retirement, view pies, and here they are. And of course, the idea is you would pick one that's close to when you plan to retire. And then for each year, and they're in 5-year increments, they give you aggressive, conservative, and moderate. So let's go to 2050 for no particular reason. And we're going to start at aggressive. A couple of things to note. Here's the portfolio. And on the one hand, I think all of these funds are totally unnecessary. You could just do this in a 3-fund portfolio. My hunch is you'd end up about the same. Now, of course, this is M1 Finance. So from a portfolio management perspective, it doesn't really much matter. You just click a button and rebalance. So it's like all of this complexity is sort of hidden from you, if you will. You don't have to deal with actually rebalancing into all of these crazy percentages. I think it's totally unnecessary. And I think, I don't know what M1 Finance's motivation is, but like if an advisor did this, my impression would be that they didn't want to do a 3-fund portfolio because it wouldn't look like they're adding value. Honestly, this is just totally unnecessary. But again, it's M1 Finance, so it's easy to deal with. That's the first point I'd make. The second point is, so this one's called aggressive, right? And if you look at it, I think it's these two down here are bond funds, and that's it. So it's 3% bond funds. There's some exposure to commodities, that's fine. Everything else in here are stocks, right? There are international, which I'm fine with, but some folks don't want international. So that's something to keep in mind. But the thing I wanted to show you is, like, if we go to 2050, let's go to conservative. The asset allocation is roughly 80-20. Let's see, there's 10% bonds here. It's long-term bond, keep that in mind. And then here's short, intermediate term, that's 5, so that's still the 15%. Here's international, so we're at 19. Yeah, so we're at 19% bonds. The reason I point that out is I don't think most people would call that conservative. Maybe for long-term investing, 80-20 is considered conservative. I don't know. The point I'm making, though, is you need to look into the portfolio and figure out what it actually invests in. Don't read too much into conservative, moderate, and aggressive. It is true, though, that aggressive is going to have the least amount of bond allocation. Moderate will have a little bit more, and conservative a little bit more, as we saw. But I think these are perfectly fine. Yeah. Also keep in mind that, if you're going to retire in 2050, you don't have to pick the 2050 fund. You could pick 2045 or 2055 if it matches your allocation better. I promise you the target date retirement cops will not come arrest you if you want to retire in 2050 and you invest in the 2055 fund. All right, let me just check the chat. Okay, a few people are still watching. Good. I'm getting to this week's questions soon, but I did promise that I would get through last week's that I missed, and we're almost done. All right. Jamie asked, how do you feel about passive quantitative value strategies like magic formula or acquirer's multiple? So I'm going to just show you what this is. These magic thing, what's it called again? I've read about these in the past. Magic formula. It's from Joel Greenblatt, and here he is. He wrote the little book that beats the market, and he has sort of a strategy. And he's got a website that I think the 1990s called. They asked for it back, but in any event, there's his website. Could be a brilliant. The short answer is I read that question so that I've got it. I'm going to actually read his book. I'll let you know what I think. Generally, though, I've got this investing formula. I'm generally not in favor of it. A couple of folks pointed out that I got the IRA contribution limits in 2022 wrong. I said they go up. They don't. 401k does, but I was wrong. IRA contribution limits stay the same in 2022. I don't know how that's possible given inflation, but whatever. Jay asks, any calculators out there that help make the decision as to which pension option you should take? Well, I don't know if it's any good, but I can show you one. And I'll leave links below the video after we're done. This is an article on Forbes. I'll leave a link to it. It's by Bill Baldwin. You can Google this too, maximizing your pension with this calculator. I don't know Bill personally, but everything I've heard of him, extremely highly regarded. He was, I think, the managing editor at Forbes back in the day. He's retired. And he links to this calculator, and you'll see the link down here. And if you click that, it takes you to actually a Google Drive calculator. I've not dug into this calculator, but there it is. So you can check it out. And again, I'll leave links to it. One thing I'll say about a lot of this is it would be so much easier to answer these questions, along with questions like, how should I take Social Security, if we just knew when we were going to die. Most of us don't. And so, you're often dealing with worst case scenarios. Either, let's just take Social Security, for example. Should you take it at 62 or wait? Well, if you're desperate for the money and you need it to live on, you take it at 62. If you're concerned about longevity risk, living to be 110, you probably wait till you're 70. But which one will end up being the best, you won't know until you're dead. Well, that's not true, actually. If you live to be 104, there's no doubt that waiting till 70 was the better option, and you're not dead. So anyway, Mario asked me about 47 times, trying to get my attention, how often can someone trade long-term bond mutual funds? Well, for the most part, as long as you want, as often as you want. They actually trade because it's a mutual fund. They're going to execute the trade at the end of the trading day. It's not an ETF, right? ETF, you can trade like stocks. The one thing you have to note, though, and I don't know how prevalent this is in bond mutual funds specifically, but my guess is it's there. There can be fees if you for trading too much, and there could be limits on some funds, so it can be fund specific. Ethan asked perhaps the most important question of the day: what TV shows have you been watching and liking lately? I'm actually sort of almost done with Hit and Run on Netflix. Pretty good. I like it. Okay. A lot of questions about Berkshire. What do you think about Berkshire considering the age of Munger, who's like, I don't know, is he 98? How old is Munger? Charlie Munger age. 97. He was born on January 1. That's cool. He'll be 98, God willing. And Buffett is younger. He's like, is he 91? Yeah. Okay. Do you think when they pass, the change in management will affect future performance? So, first of all, if I'm being totally honest, I don't know. But I do. That doesn't stop me from having an opinion. I think in terms of the day-to-day management of their operating companies, I think it'll have zero effect, right? Their energy company, Geico, well, I hesitate a bit on insurance, but I don't think Buffett manages the insurance portfolio. I don't think he has for a while. or at least not large pieces of it. So, because that's how insurance makes money, right? They can make money on underwriting, meaning the premiums they charge versus what they pay out. And those two things can happen years apart, right? But there can be underwriting profits. A lot of insurance companies actually lose money on the underwriting, but what they do is they make money on the float, which is the money that the premiums that come in that they get a hold on to for years. You think about car insurance. Hopefully you pay car insurance for decades and never need it, right? Well, that's just float they get a hold on to and invest. In any event, in terms of day-to-day operations, I don't think much. I don't even think in terms of the portfolio, the stock portfolio. I think he's turned over so much of that to a couple of other guys there. I just don't see it having a big effect. Where there could be a big effect, though, is in future deals, not buying stocks, but in private deals where they're buying whole companies. Because, I mean, Buffett is one of a kind in that regard, not just in terms of his ability to analyze companies. I'm sure the people on his team are rock stars at that as well, but just by reputation, people, in the Great Recession, when people needed help, companies needed, a lot of money. It was phone calls to Warren Buffett. Will Berkshire continue to get those kind of phone calls and those kind of deals? I don't know. I'm not as confident about that. I own shares of Berkshire, and I don't plan to sell them. But okay. Thomas asks, is renting okay? Yes, it is. Does it give better return if I invest the money I save in stock market versus house ownership with mortgage? Well, it's just going to depend partly on where you live. And if you Google stock renting versus buying calculators, you'll get some calculators, and there's some rules of thumb. A lot of it depends on where you live, and housing prices and rental prices can make a big difference. Like, in where I live, one could argue maybe for renting because housing prices are so crazy. In Ohio, it's a totally different equation. But one of the advantages to buying is that it's sort of a forced savings program. You're sort of, unless you're going to get evicted, you're sort of forced to pay your mortgage, which pays down your debt. There's also leverage involved. And while generally leverage is a bad thing, I think with a home is probably one of the biggest exceptions. And long term, that's why it's often a family's biggest asset and biggest source of wealth. So in that sense, I think buying a home, can be a very smart thing for a lot of people. Now, if you're very diligent, the delta between your rent and what you'd pay for a comparable home with a mortgage is significant where you live, and you're diligent and you save every dime and invest it over the long term, I think you're going to do just fine. I think at the end of the day, for me, the decision was never one of building wealth. It was just, do I want to own my own home or not? All right. I think that's about it. I'm sure I missed some, but you'll have to forgive me. Now I'm back to the live chat. See if anyone's still here. There's a few people still here. All right, good. Ianit? I don't know. Asks, do you have some investment tips for Europeans? I started investing in VUSA, Vanguard's S&P 500. I chose the UCITS ETF based on recommendations of a YouTuber. Well, first of all, for the love of God, don't listen to anyone on YouTube. Oh, my word. I don't know. So I'm guessing I can't look any of these up. It's amazing to me how geographic our investment opportunities are. I don't get it. It's got to be regulations. But UCITS. Yeah, so like when I go to Morningstar, if it's an international fund, and by international I mean not a U.S. fund that invests in international companies, but a fund based out of Europe or something, it's not in Morningstar. So I don't have any specific fund recommendations. I think the general. The hard thing about here's the hard thing is that studies show that we tend to invest more in the country we live in. So if you're in Canada, it's likely you have a lot of your portfolio in Canadian companies, even though that would make not much sense. I love Canada, but that just doesn't make much sense, right? And the reality is, U.S. companies should be a major part of, I think, any portfolio. For the most part, regardless of where you live. The one caveat, as I start to think about this in more depth, is there could be currency issues that you need to deal with. um, and currency risk depending on where you live. And so that's a whole nother issue. But by and large, I think we want a well-diversified portfolio that covers the globe, I think. I know some folks say just US companies and they will in turn cover the globe. Probably not something European is going to want to do. But I would say I think you need exposure to the US market. Sounds like you've got it. Beyond that, I don't know that I have any great tips. He also wants to know, do you think, the next question goes to hedging currencies. Do you think currency hedged ETFs are worth the greater management fee? Well, one, it would depend on what that fee is and why you want to hedge, but yeah, you may need to. I actually, I kind of like currency risk. I think it gives a little diversity, but I'm guessing my funds are all hedged. But I'll be honest with you, I've not actually looked that up. But if you're in a different country and you're putting a lot of money in a U.S. company, it may be worth it. It would just depend on the details, the cost, why you're doing it. In Europe, the euro versus the dollar, I don't know. I don't know if it's worth it. That's my answer. I don't know. So Richard wants to know what types of investments are best to keep in a Roth IRA. So I think it's those investments that have the highest expected return. So if you think stocks versus bonds, it would be stocks. If you want to drill down into that, and say, well, what kind of stocks? So let's say you have small cap value in emerging markets, which tend to have higher expected returns. I keep those in our Roth accounts. If you invest in individual stocks and to some extent, and you think you've got some that over the long term will do very well, that's another option. But basically, you want, as my mom would say, you want your Roth retirement accounts to become as fat as a tick. She doesn't say that, by the way, in the context of investing. All right. Is there any good way to rebalance a brokerage account without getting killed in capital gains taxes? Well, and that's from Tony. So obviously, if you sell a gain, you're going to get taxed. So what can you do? Well, you cannot automatically reinvest dividends and interest and use that to rebalance because you're going to pay taxes on them anyway. Obviously, if you have new contributions, you can use that to help rebalance. The other thing you can do, and I talked about this in the video on opportunistic rebalancing, you don't have to bring the asset class back to your intended target. So like if say you got 30% S&P 500, and you're going to let that vary by 20%. So that would be 6%. So you're willing to go up as high as 36 before you rebalance or as low as 24. That's your range, your band. Well, once you hit one of those bands, you don't have to go all the way back to 30. And this was the point in the paper that I showed in that video. It's a study. Anyway, what they would say is just bring it back to the halfway point. So if you hit 36 and you've got taxes are a concern, just rebalance back to 33. That's good enough. It's like horseshoes and hand grenades. Close is okay. And that can help. Obviously, if you have losses, you can offset losses, and there's always that. And the other thing, I guess, is if you have, one of the things that I messed this up in my portfolio, but it's good not to have asset classes that are just in your taxable account. It'd be nice to have some of that of each asset class in retirement accounts. So you might be able to rebalance in a retirement accounts such that your overall portfolio has the asset allocation you want. So that's another tip. Edward, what do you know about transfer of traditional IRA to HSA with lifetime limit of 4,300? I don't know anything about that. That's an easy answer. Can you transfer a traditional IRA to an HSA? Yes, you can. Well, we're all learning. Well, I'm learning. You guys probably already knew this. According to Investopedia, and it's on the internet, so it's got to be right. Did you know you can make a one-time penalty and tax-free rollover of money from your individual retirement account to a health savings account? The process is officially known as a qualified HSA funding distribution, and it was made possible by the Health Opportunity Patient Empowerment Act in 2006. There you go. There it is. That's what I know. I'm looking for that $4,300 number. I wonder what that was in reference to, because it's not the HSA limits, as you can see here. They've got some of them right here. Yeah, so I guess you can do it. They say it's one time, which is kind of interesting to me. I think they said one time. Yeah, one time. So there you go. Edward, thanks for the question. I'll have to dig into that more, but yeah, I did not know that. You must have to pay the taxes, right? No, it's tax-free. How can that be tax-free? I guess it's tax-free because your contribution to the HSA wouldn't be taxed anyway. Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, I learned something. Mark says, I refinanced my 3% mortgage to 2%, took out more than the balance, invested the difference. The income earned equals the mortgage interest, net effect 0% mortgage. Oh, good job, I guess. Took more out, bounced back. The income earned, well, I guess the one question mark is, how did you invest it? Is the income guaranteed? But, good for you. Curious Mind wants to know, not sure if you covered this before, but what would be your recommendation specifically for non-retirement taxable accounts in terms of portfolio? So there's some things to keep out of them, like a REIT, right? You don't want a REIT in a taxable account. If you're going to have bonds, and particularly if you in a high tax bracket, you want to think about municipal bonds, muni bonds. But beyond that, I just look for, in our case, it was just low cost, very efficient, low turnover index funds. The one thing I would caution is if you're going to invest in international funds, make sure to do some homework to figure out what percentage of their dividends are qualified dividends that get you the long-term capital gains treatment. Because you shouldn't assume that they're going to be all qualified dividends. But beyond that, we've got a very, very efficient taxable portfolio. And in addition to, some of it's in stocks, including, the stocks pay some dividends. Their yields, Apple yields pretty low. Berkshire doesn't pay a dividend. I have two banks, and that's a little higher, although some of the banks are in retirement accounts. And then just index funds, and they've been pretty efficient. I can tell you, I'll give you a rough idea. About a 1.25 yield, mainly in dividends, and then no capital gains. I haven't had a capital gain. Obviously, if I sell, there's a capital gain. But as you know, mutual funds can also trigger capital gains even when you don't sell. But with like Vanguard index funds, for example, that hasn't happened in a long time, but at least not to me. Is there a calculator that you are aware of that optimizes rebalancing within a taxable account to limit negative tax implications? I'm not, let's see if I can find something. There was one, I'm not going to be able to find it. The short answer is I don't know. It's a good question. I will, I'm going to add it. I'll see if I can find something. Jack asks a good question that I'm not going to know the answer to, but maybe someone else does. Medicare has a 2-year look back for IRMAA premium determination. If 1-year income increased solely due to Roth conversion, can the higher premium be forgiven right away, or do you suffer? Well, Jack, I think as a general rule, I kind of assume we're just going to suffer. Let's look it up. See, I'm not old enough to have to worry about this right now. But according to Woodsmith Advisors, and I don't know who they are, if your income is on the threshold of qualifying for IRMAA treatment, otherwise known as suffering, I added that part. A Roth conversion could force you to start paying premiums as a percentage of your higher income. What they say. Philip asks a great question. Are you still planning on updating your excellent current investment tracking spreadsheet to include total return calculations? Well, Philip, thanks for asking. I am in the middle of an online course on Google Apps scripting. And what I plan to do, it's not that hard, it's mainly JavaScript. And I'm not a JavaScript expert, but I can hack away at it. And my goal is to take the spreadsheet to the next level through that scripting. And I'm really excited about it. And in terms of total return calculations, I'm not, so I think what you're asking is, will the spreadsheet just calculate your returns? I don't know yet. I don't know how complicated that will be. That would be fun to add to it. I'm going to figure out how. So I'll say yes. Ways to invest for a grandchild without giving money to the parents. Child will have Social Security soon. Well, and this is an area that I'm just not an expert in. Well, I'm not an expert in anything, but that I've not spent a lot of time on, because you can create custodial accounts that belong to that technically belong to the child. You could create a trust with you being the trustee. My hesitation in all of this, though, and this was Edward asked this, is that there are going to be issues with when who owns the account, the child being able to take control at 18, which you may or may not want, and there are tax issues. So it's a great question, but you really want to talk to either an attorney or a financial advisor that can give you solid advice. But are there ways? Yes, there are ways. Absolutely. So I get this question all the time. This is from RA, and I just don't know the answer. But there's been a lot of that today. Is anyone even still watching? How can U.S. citizens invest if currently working in Japan? U.S. brokerage firms like Vanguard will not allow an account due to IRS rules. And I don't know what the answer is. I can't tell you how many people have emailed me or asked me in comments a question like this. I've got to get to the bottom of it. It's just never been an issue that I've had to deal with. So if anyone has any resources that they can suggest, I'd love to take a deep dive into it. Philip, back to the spreadsheet, said he tweaked my spreadsheet to reflect his international stock allocation to my total equity amount as compared to my total portfolio amount. Am I wrong? No. I think it's good to know, U.S. versus international. It's useful. RA, I could do a video on interactive brokers, but I've never used them before. Neil wants my view on VGHCX. It has a 16% annual return since 1984. What? Is that true? What is VGHCX? Oh, Vanguard Healthcare. Huh. Does it really? That seems hard to believe. Whoops. Let's go to performance. I don't know. Its 15-year track record is only 11.36. I say only. I mean, that's not, I guess we could go to, let me jump over to Portfolio Visualizer. I don't know if it'll go back that far. What's the ticker again? VGHCX. 100%. Analyze the portfolio. Yeah, it does, 16%. Now that's if you invest a lump sum at the beginning, right? I like to, because that's not how most people invest, right? At least that's never how I did. That could be relevant like in retirement where you're going to do that and then you're going to withdraw a fixed amount. But let's just say we're going to contribute, we'll start with $1 and then we're going to contribute whatever, doesn't matter. We'll say $250 a month. How would we do? So this, you can't really, this gets wonky when you start to do that. When you start to have contributions, that's not correct. Boy, that's huge. Still says a final balance of 4 million. Let's compare that to S&P. Can I go back that far? How far are we going back? We're going back to 85. This won't go back that far. Goes back, it's still 94. It's pretty good. And yeah, it clobbers it. Wow. Huh. And if we look at its portfolio, the healthcare is sort of interesting, and whether you should. So keep in mind. Well, let's look at the portfolio first. Yeah, I mean, it's what you'd expect, I guess. I've heard of most of these companies, as I'm sure you have as well. 100 equity holdings. Healthcare is interesting. We all know that healthcare, it's not going anywhere. It's a big industry and it will continue to be big. It's obviously heavily regulated, which can present some challenges. This fund is done, no matter how you look at it, very well. And so, if you want exposure to the healthcare industry, I think this is, I've not studied this fund literally other than what we just looked at, but, it's a Vanguard fund. I'm sure it's low cost. Let's just double check. Yeah, 32 basis points. For a sector fund, it's probably pretty good. I'm always a little nervous to try to take too much of my portfolio and dedicate it to sector, keeping in mind that if you have sort of a broad-based portfolio, total stock market, S&P 500, you've got plenty of exposure to healthcare, right? You just don't have, you're not, I'll say, overweighted in healthcare. So the real big question is, are you willing to make the bet that it's not that healthcare will still be around in the future? That's obviously the case, but that it's going to outperform the market as a whole. And if someone said they want to put 5 or 10% in that bet, that sounds reasonable to me. It's not a bet that I've made, but I've missed out on a lot of good opportunities. What I wanted to show you, and let me pull it up here, and then so like if you look at the S&P 500 fund, this is Vanguard's. You can see their sector allocation, and of course it's just going to match the market more or less. And so you can see healthcare is right here, 13% of the fund. It's classified as defensive, which kind of means, everyone needs healthcare, right? Even in a bad economy, people still need to go to the doctor. And so it doesn't mean it can't go down in value, and it doesn't mean that companies' revenues can't go down, but it tends not to be as cyclical in nature as some of these other sectors. But yeah, it looks like a good fund to me. Salty has a really important question. Why do you always play in the class sections instead of the open section? Are you a scaredy cat? I know what most of you are thinking. What the heck does that mean? So in chess, you have a rating. My rating is, I don't know, somewhere in the 1900s. It's over 2,000 on chess.com, though. I got that going for me. And so a lot of tournaments, they'll put you in groups based on your rating. So there might be a group that's, say, 1,800 to 2,000. So that'd be the group I'm in. And then they might have 2,000 to 2,200, and then an open section. And an open section anyone can play in, but also if you're above, say, in my example, 2,200, you have to play. You can't play in a lower section. You can always play in a higher section. So like as Salty is apparently insulting me and calling me a scaredy cat, or at least asking the question. I have played in the open sections before, but I'm 19, let's say I'm 1950. My average opponent in the open section would be 2,400. It's not a matter of being afraid, or I think even more, losing. I can lose against 1,600 rated players. I don't need the open section to lose. But it's like the difference in playing ability is so great that after a while, I'm just not sure it's all that useful. But I have played in the open section from time to time. And I play in a team event in New Jersey every year in February, the amateur team. And in the group I play in, I'm usually the top rated player in my team of 4, which means I always play the top rated player against any team we play. And I've played, 2600s, 2500s, and had some really good games against them. Don't normally win, but Sridhar, and I'm sure I'm messing that up. Have you ever considered reviewing crowdfunding opportunities like Farm Together and Fundrise? Any advice on how much to allocate? I could. I haven't. I'm very familiar with them. One of them, I met the folks behind Acre Trader at a conference I was at, where you can invest in farmland. And I liked them, and I considered investing. I haven't yet. Part of the issue with some of these is that you've got to really understand the tax implications of these investments. And for some of them, they're going to be better off in a retirement account, which is going to mean a self-directed IRA, which just I haven't gone to the hassle of setting it up. But I'm happy to dig into those and give you my thoughts in a future video. Yeah, I will do that. Hopefully I'll remember. The problem is I've got like literally 150 videos to do. Sean says, thoughts on buying $10,000 in I bonds versus putting more into Roth 401k. Well, assuming you're like saving for retirement, you're years away from retirement, I would absolutely do a 401k, Roth or otherwise, before I did I bonds. I mean, the I bond rate now is attractive. It's what, 7.12%, but that's just for 6 months. The guaranteed rate stayed the same, 0. And in 6 months it could go higher, lower. We don't know. Obviously depends on what the CPI does, and obviously we've seen inflation here so far. But and I think I bonds are great, and I own an I bond. And the only reason I would buy more, the only reason I haven't is because I got to change the bank associated with Treasury Direct, and you can't do it online. I've literally got to take a form down to my bank and have them sign it. Absurd. But I wouldn't personally. I'd max out my retirement accounts before I invest in an I bond. That's would be my approach. Yeah. Okay. What do we got? Are you concerned about cryptocurrency mining being bad for the environment? That's Ethan asked that. I mean, concerned, I am. And I argue with a good friend of mine. I don't know if you're listening, Joe, but if you are, hello. And he's a big crypto bull, and he's done well. Hats off to him. And he was a miner for a while. And we'll debate this because his point is, what the impact on the environment of currencies are. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, Joe. Currencies are used for trillions of dollars in transactions 24/7. Bitcoin is not used for practically really anything right now, not to mention, by the way, the thousands of other coins. I think we're going to look back on crypto, and I think there's a good chance we'll look back on it and we'll say, that was the most ludicrous thing we ever did. Now, I could be wrong. But in the words of the theme song to Monk, I don't think so. All right. So yeah, I'm concerned, but I'm concerned about the environment for a lot of reasons. So Heiniger wants thoughts on dimensional funds, ETFs, dedicated factor weighting, portfolio tilting, market capitalization risk. Is that all you want to know? Just kidding. I like dimensional funds, and as some have pointed out, you can invest in them directly. M1 Finance has them. I will do a deep dive on dimensions. So I will show you, though, there's a great website. I love this website. It is, if I can find it. Hang on. It's worth the wait, I promise you. Where is it? This isn't it here. It used to be on the first page. What happened to this site? Well, I'm not going to be able to find it. I'm going to be upset. Oh, I can't find it now. I'll see if I can. It's a great website, even if you don't like dimensional funds. It's so strange. Like, there it is. Here it is. I think I found it. Yeah, I did. I found it. It's IFA. I was doing IAF. IFA.com. Index fund. So I think what they are is just an investment advisor that uses dimensional funds, among other things, I'm sure. But they have some really cool, this website is excellent. They have some really cool tools where you can I'll just show you. We'll just look at IFA Index Portfolio 90. And they give you all these charts, historical analysis. It's just great data. I like the user interface. Could stand for a little bit of an update. You can look at all the different, so these numbers represent the equity allocation. So IFA Index Portfolio, as you can see, 90 is 90% stocks, 10% bonds. They show you returns data, annual returns, by year, growth of $1, interesting time periods with data. I mean, this is just one page. You can look at all the different, you could jump to, different allocations. Oh, this is interesting. Glide path. Let's turn that on. What happens? So glide path refers to your stock bond allocation sort of as you near and enter retirement. Typically, bonds go up, stocks go down. I haven't even dived into this tool. Anyway, great website. So again, it's IFA.com. So I'll do a deep dive on dimensional funds. I think to some extent, dedicated factor weighting, portfolio tilting, market cap, risk, unless you just buy the market, unless your stock portfolio is just, say, total stock market, we all do some of that. If you have small cap value, right? You've tilted. You're looking at some factors, market cap, value versus growth. And I always do some of that. I just don't do it in an extreme way. I might have 10% in small cap, 10% in emerging markets, 10% in REITs. So there's some tilting, as they call it. I don't go extreme, at least I don't think I do. Keep in mind, though, if you just went total stock market, you have all exposure to all of those different things, just not in smaller amounts than if you were to actually, in addition to that, say, put 10% in small cap, for example. David says, hey, Rob, I sent you an email for a portfolio analysis. You have time? Can you give me your feedback? Well, I don't know. Did I get the email? David, I'll have to find it. How long ago did you send it? Alex says, does it make sense to use Ray Dalio Portfolio to save for a down payment and closing costs of the first home, 5-year window? Alex, I wouldn't. I mean, it can lose a lot of money. And that's not a criticism of the Ray Dalio portfolio. I'm not altogether a fan of it. Remember, for example, his portfolio has long-term bond exposure, and you could get killed. I got a gnat flying around here. You could get killed in the short term on that. So, I know that yields, interest rates are so, rock bottom low, but if you need the money in a couple of years, I wouldn't be taking risks with it. That's how I would approach it. So Martin asks a great question. Could you explain the different cost basis methods when selling a fund or ETF? What's best for FIFO, LIFO, high cost, low cost, specific lots, tax lot optimizer? So Martin, I will be honest here. I've always just done an average, Vanguard or Fidelity or Merrill Edge or Schwab, wherever you keep your money, they'll calculate that for you. You can take other approaches, as you've pointed out, and sometimes it may make sense, specifically the specific lot approach. If you bought a chunk of an ETF or stock or whatever, and it crashed, maybe you bought it as well 5 years earlier and it's still at a gain, but you bought more and it's gone down and you want to sell at a loss. You don't want to average those two together, right? But you could talk to your broker, and if you have a tax person, but they could tell you, they should be able to tell you what the options are and what your gains or losses will be. But you could very much want to sell a very specific lot. And so I don't know what else you want me to say about it, but it can be a good strategy. The reason it doesn't apply to me is a couple-fold. One, almost without fail, the only reason I sell is to give them to charity, and I pick ones with gains, and I just take an average. I'm fine with that. And I just don't do a lot of buying and selling. I wouldn't have any lots at a loss right now. Of course, I've just jinxed us, right? Now the market's going to crash. It's up today, a little bit. Okay. So David says, oh, he's a sub-billionaire. I once calculated how old I would have to be, how long I would have to live to become a billionaire. Assuming I had some income to live off of and just could keep the investments going. And it's not as long as you think, because the compounding at like year 100 or 110, and it just snowballs. I think I had to not spend any money and live to be like 120 or 30. I don't know, something like that. I'd be a billionaire. UCITS equals collective investment in transferable securities. I don't know if that's a question or a comment. I don't know. Quincy says, should I take advantage of an open mutual fund window with the TSP next year, such as adding an EM index because the iFund doesn't include those countries? Well, let's start with what I might know. So iFund is so with the TSP for savings plan, they've got letters for all the C fund, the S fund, the G fund, the F fund. I, as you might expect, is international. I did not realize, though, and I just want to see if I can confirm this, that there were no emerging markets. Because it matches the MSCI EA. I'm looking this up. I'll show you when I get something worth showing. This is the index that it tries to track. Oh, this is what I'm looking at, by the way. It's this one right here. And I'm looking to see if they have country exposure. Yeah, maybe they are just developed. Huh. Interesting. So I don't, but beyond that, I mean, if basically, if I understand your question is, should you have emerging market exposure? I think so. I have emerging market exposure. I like the added diversity. It's a lot of volatility, but good expected return. So it's, obviously we each have to make our own decisions, but I have emerging market, and I have for a very long time. Actually, my first emerging market fund was in 2003. I bought VMAX, which is Vanguard's emerging market fund, and it went up like a gazillion %. Better to be lucky than good, right? Let's see how far back you can see this. Of course, then it lost like a gazillion %. So I'll show you on the screen here. So VMAX goes, it only goes to 2007. Really? It's been around long. Oh, this is Admiral. I wonder if there was an investor class. Yeah, well, you can see it was up big in like 03, 04. But you can see like this year it lost 2008. Well, it's 2008, lost 52%, but it lost a lot like in 05 or something. So very volatile. Just keep that in mind. Do you think ETFs are something people look into borrowing for shorting? Well, I mean, people short ETFs. I don't. Shorting a stock, to me, and some people make a lot of money on it, but it requires a belief in the short-term movement of the price, where you can get burned bad. I don't know. To me, investing is hard enough. Why make it more difficult? L asks a very specific question. Can you talk about the impact of a 1% rise in interest rates chart on page 34 of the JP Morgan Guide to the Markets? Okay, I don't know what that is. Let's jump right on that. You guys are terrific. The JP Morgan Guide to the Markets. See if I can find it, if I can get to it. Maybe it's this. Is this the current year? I'll show it to you when I pull it up. Here it is. Page 34. Whee, whee. I always like these charts. Is crypto in here? I don't think so. Anyway, page 34. And we'll see if I'm looking at the right thing. Page 3. This is an interesting document. I like all the charts. It's colorful. Here we go. I found it. Impact of a 1% rise in interest rates. Assume a parallel shift in the yield curve. I personally don't like to assume a parallel shift, but we'll do that for the sake of JP Morgan. Okay, so total return and price return. All right. Well, yeah, so basically, if interest rates go up by 1%, the value of fixed incomes goes down by roughly a percentage equal to their duration, right? So 2-year goes down by 2%. They say tips, I'm guessing this is intermediate term tips, 5.2. By the way, this one right here, 30-year treasury goes down by 20%. That's one of the reasons, the earlier question for saving for like a house or whatever it was, and the Ray Dalio portfolio. I mean, basically things drop like a rock. So, I mean, this seems right to me, not that JP Morgan needs my approval, but yeah, I mean, a 1% rise. Now, keep in mind, this is looking at a fixed point in time. You know, if you have a bond fund and you're a long-term investor, yeah, the value is going to go down, but over time, they're going to, as they replace bonds, which they're doing all the time to maintain the duration and maturity of their portfolio, they're going to get they're going to get higher yielding bonds, right? They may not be new issues. They may buy them on the secondary market, but because interest rates have gone up, they'll get them at a discount. The yields will be higher than they would have otherwise received. And over time, you do make that up. As far as how likely this scenario is, I think it's very likely. If you look at, let me see if I can pull something else up for you. I was looking at this the other day. And this was on I think Fred had something. Fred's the St. Louis Fed's database. Let me just see what I can, yeah, so let me show you this. This is the 10-year maturity, the yields on the 10-year treasury, right? And it goes all the way back to what, 1960? 62, right? And what I was looking for, of course, I remember all this. I was getting 16% on the 6-month CD. I was in high school at this point. But what I was really looking for was how quickly can interest rates change? I mean, look at this. Like here, they were at 12.7% in February of 1980, 12.7. So they went down in this case, you know, almost 3% in a few months. It's unbelievable. And of course, they can go up, right? Here they were, what was the low point? Maybe 10.3 in 83. And by a year later, you know, they're up 3.5 to 4%. And then they plunge and then they're up. So I think, you know, a quick 1% rise is very, wouldn't shock me. It would be shocking just because of the impact it would have on the markets, and not just the bond market. But I'm not predicting anything. I trying to predict inflation and interest rates is just, the professionals can't do it. So, Salty, I'm ignoring your question, but I guess I won't ignore it. I'm just not going to read it. But no, it's not a good plan. I was going to say, because I wouldn't pick Panama, but Yeah, it's not even funny. All right. So Pedro wants to know thoughts on keeping 2 years cash in retirement phase versus less to protect during market downturns. Boy, we've answered this question in so many different ways. I can tell you my approach. I don't want to keep 2 years in cash, and I don't want to worry about the market. I'm going to protect against the market downturn in other ways. One, by having no debt. Two, by having a very diversified portfolio. Three, by having the right stock bond allocation. That's mainly it. And so I'm not going to keep more cash than about 1 year's worth. And everything else, is going to be invested. Now, I say invested because the fixed income or bond portion could be in short-term bonds, which are almost like cash. Although I think my sort of go-to bond portfolio is intermediate-term bonds. I just don't like the drag of having that much cash, and I don't want to start trying to time the market and go in and out of it based on what I think is going to happen in the future. So my approach is just 1 year, no more than 1 year of cash. If you're going to have 2 years, you could have 2 years but have one of it or some amount of it part of your bond allocation, if that makes sense. I tend to think of it as having 1 year and then I spend it down and fill it back up. But whatever I have there is sort of outside my bond allocation. When you go beyond about 1 year, it probably should start becoming part of your bond allocation. Otherwise, you end up, I think, skewing your stock bond allocation. Again, 1 year versus 2 years for most people probably not going to be that big a deal, but that's my approach. Dan, you're here. So Dan, are you a Google Apps script guru? I will absolutely reach out to you when I finish the course. Dan is the original creator of the spreadsheet. He is in the chat. We are visited by greatness. Anything I've done to it has probably just broken it. And Vinyl, I don't care if real programmers laugh at JavaScript. I was litigating cases on C++ before probably most of you were born. I don't know why I just said that, although it is true. I had C++ experts. They were hard to understand. Trying to explain to a jury C++, that ain't easy. So Tyler says, I refi real estate I own that is paid for to purchase more real estate. Yeah. I've also used that method to invest in stocks. That scares me. Borrow 100 grand at 3.6 for 30 years. I will pay 64,000 in interest. Well, as long as that works for you. I mean, the math, I can't argue with the math. I can't argue with your math. All right. James says, should I fund a Roth using a 6-fund strategy and fund the same amounts year after year? Do you ever deviate from the strategy? I've always had a 6-fund portfolio, at least as long as I can remember. So it's, so you can think of it as sort of like S&P 500, small cap stocks, usually 10% in REITs. So that's three asset classes. Developed, international, emerging market, and then bonds. And sometimes the bonds are split into a couple like tips and treasuries, but certainly not the only way to invest at all. I mean, there's hundreds of good, reasonable ways to invest. That's been my approach. And I just don't generally vary it. I do have some individual stocks that I've mentioned in the past. But I've done individual stocks since 2010, something like that. And it's not many. I have 4 right now. That's it. Okay. Thomas says, after company matching, should I put more into my 401k or invest in a Roth IRA or taxable account? I assume my taxes will be at lower rate in retirement, and I won't retire before 60. Well, let's see here. Assuming this is all for retirement, I don't know why unless you needed the money sooner, but assume you don't. I don't know why you'd invest in a taxable account before the 401k or the Roth IRA. I'm trying to think of a reason for that. Again, if you needed access to the money, That might be a reason, although you can always take out contributions from a Roth IRA, penalty and tax-free. I can't think of a good reason to put money in taxable account. And then as between 401k or a Roth IRA, first question I would have is, do you have a Roth 401k option? I'm not saying it's better, but you've picked a Roth IRA, I'm assuming for a reason. And so if you think the Roth is better for you, you could do a Roth 401k as well, if it's an option. And then the difference is less important. Again, you can always take out Roth IRA contributions, penalty and tax-free. So if that is of value to you, that may be one reason to favor the Roth. Again, once you've got company matches. The other thing you say that's interesting is taxes will be at a lower rate. So, that may favor traditional, right? So then the question is, why are you in a Roth, right? Because you're paying higher taxes now than you'll pay when you retire. So you want to save on the taxes now. I don't know why I've got my arms out here like this. So those are just questions to think about, Thomas. Maybe your strategy is to have a little of both. I don't think that's a bad strategy. Anut, I wish I could pronounce these names. I just can't. What kind of REITs do you invest in? Is it worth investing in mortgage REITs? They seem to have a nice dividend yield. I just go with, I can show it to you. I just go with the Vanguard REIT. VNQ is I don't have this one. This is the ETF version. I guess we'll look at Admiral shares. If you go to the portfolio, 170 REITs, and there's going to be mortgage REITs in here, I assume. They've got pretty much just about everything. And, I've not done a deep dive on REITs in terms of other options. That's just what I've used. Brian says, should you include home equity as a retirement asset? If so, should you include it in the 4% calculation? Well, unless you plan to spend the equity, then no, I would not include it in the 4% calculation. I would not. Now, there are ways to spend the equity, right? You may downsize at some point in retirement. You could possibly do a reverse mortgage. There are ways to get at the equity. And if that's part of your plan, then I don't know. I'm not sure that I still might not include it in the 4% calculation. Well, what I would probably do is use a tool like Personal Capital, or maybe even better, New Retirement or On Trajectory, where you can model this. And you can say, in 21 years from now, whatever, I assume my house is going to be worth this much, and I'm going to downsize, or I'm going to do a reverse mortgage. But I don't think I would just lump it into my investments and calculate the 4% on it. At least that's not how Bill Bengen did it. By the way, do you see the Morningstar paper that they say the 3.3% is the new safe withdrawal rate? Here it is. Just came out. I think I may have mentioned this last week, but you can check it out if it's of interest to you. I need to read this article in depth. I will say I'm skeptical of this. I'm skeptical when someone says, "Hey, it was actually 4.1. 4.1% was the lowest, the worst possible retirement outcome since 1871." Because Kitz's took it all the way back. Bengen stopped at 1926. Kitz's went further back. Since 1871, the worst year to retire was in the late 60s. And if you did 66, 68, they kind of compete against one another as the worst. The most you could take out in year one is 4% or 4.1%. There were some years you could have taken out 10% and adjusted for inflation, and it would have lasted 30 years. But the worst case out of the last 150 years was 4.1%. But now, based on our assumptions and future projections, it's 3.3. I'm skeptical. But I haven't read the report in detail. So I need to. I've been busy. Dave says, sub-billionaire, you tried to look up UCITS in Morningstar, but it's not an investment. It's a type of investment in the EU. See, I need to travel more. I'm a simple guy from Ohio. I did not know that. Well, thanks for letting me know, Dave. Travis says, Rob, hope you can get to my question from earlier. Well, Travis, if I'm down here, that means I've somehow missed your question from earlier. So if you don't mind, throw it back in the chat and I'll do my best. Eric says, what do you think of Berkshire? I've answered that. If you joined late, Eric, I will have timestamps below the video later today. But I did talk about my views on Berkshire. I do own Berkshire. I've been to 2 of the meetings. Patrick Wolf was at one of them. He's a grandmaster, and he played blindfold chess, which is exactly what it sounds like. He can't see the boards, and he played against 5 people at one time, like 5 different boards. So he had to keep in his mind each board. I've played blindfold chess against individual opponents. It's hard, but I can actually usually get through the game. I don't know how someone does it against multiple opponents. That just is mind-boggling. So Martin wants to know my thoughts on the Vanguard High-Yield Corporate Fund. I mean, if you're looking for high-yield bonds, I think it's a good fund. And way back in the day, I owned it. I'll pull it up. So high yield is a fancy way of saying junk bonds. Bonds issued to corporations that have shaky financials. Doesn't mean they're going to go bankrupt or anything. In fact, you'd be surprised at some of the companies that are considered high yield. Let me just show you. We'll go to VGHCX. Oops. The benefit, by the way, is you get a higher yield. You get more risk, right? Credit risk, they would call it in the bond world. But we can see trailing 12-month yields 4.3. I mean, in a world of, sub 1% yields on about everything, that's pretty nice. But keep in mind that the yield is only part of it. You can have capital gains or losses as well. So you could have a 4.3 yield and still lose money in a year. So keep that in mind. In fact, if we go to performance, because rates have ticked up a bit. Yeah, so year to date, it's just 2.93, but last year was 5.39. But let's look at the portfolio. Let's see what bonds they own. By the way, here, remember we talked about BBB and above being investment grade. So here you can see most of the bonds in this portfolio are BB or lower. And we're not going to see them here. So I don't think the treasury notes are what's classified as junk bonds. They just hold some cash. That's effectively cash. Yeah, right here, cash. Anyway, T-Mobile, did I see them on here? Yeah, T-Mobile, right? I don't know if they'll show us more. Let's see. Nokia, Caesars, there you go. Navient, you student loan holders, love to hate them. Xerox, okay. Dish, I don't know if that's the same thing as Dish Network, but yeah, I mean, I personally don't. The reason I moved away from high yield was I decided it's volatility. If I want the volatility of a high yield fund, and let's take a look real quick at their standard deviation, I'll just invest in stocks. My bond portfolio is, so the standard deviation of this fund is 8. That's significantly lower than the S&P 500, but it's also significantly higher than like a treasury fund. I just decided, bonds are for safety and for down markets, and when I want excitement, I'll do stocks. But I don't think it's a bad approach to have some high yield in your bond portfolio. Stacked Java wants to know what your target rate of dividend increase for a portfolio, not the yield, the rate of dividend increase. I don't have one. I don't think of it in that way. I don't think of that in terms of companies that I invest in. I certainly think of profit and cash flow and what I think the future will hold for a company. But I don't target a certain increase in dividend, either dividend payments or yields. Well, yields would be hard to do because you can't, but in any event, either way, I don't do that. Have Fun wants to know if I automate all of my investment contributions. No, I don't. In fact, the only ones I automate would be a 401k or workplace retirement. I don't automate the IRAs, the HSAs. In the spreadsheet that I'm developing that will include Google Apps scripts, I'm creating a dashboard. And one of the things I'm going to have on it, and this might be manual, I don't know, but is a section on the various accounts that have contribution limits. So your 401k at work or 403b, your IRAs, your HSAs, 529, if you're just trying to target the tax break. And so that I can see for the year, have I met the limits or not? Just one snapshot, there it is. Those are the limits for the year. Here's how much I've contributed. But I don't auto invest anything other than like a 401k. Travis, if you came into a large sum of money, 1 million or more, and I'm happy to take any money anyone wants to send me. Just kidding. I don't want your money. In the short term, how would you allocate it to keep it safe and insured, or is it keeping it in one account okay? Well, I guess it depends. If you're talking about FDIC insurance, you'd have to allocate it. You could find accounts that can give you greater than 250,000 in FDIC insurance. Otherwise, you'd need 4 accounts for $1 million. I'm not sure if that's what you mean. In terms of how I would invest it, it would just go right into my asset allocation. Simple as that. I would lump sum it. I do like having more than one broker, and we do have more than one brokerage account. How many I would have? 2 or 3, depending on how much you have. Can't imagine having more than that. I don't know. I mean, like you think about like Elon Musk, his money's in stock. So, but like if someone that's got like hundreds of millions of dollars in investments, publicly traded investments, I don't know how they do it. That's a good, I don't know, but probably most of you don't have to worry about that. I don't. Although again, if I live to be 130, could be a problem. So, but in all seriousness, I do like keeping a couple of different accounts. I don't like having everything in one account. There's a practical side to that. What if they're just down? I need access to something. I need to get some access to money, and their website's down. Not that you're going to get the money that quick anyway if you're liquidating an investment, but I just am not comfortable just having it all in one account. But I think 2 or 3 is probably more than enough for the vast majority of people. Salty wants to know whether I'll be playing in the 2021 Northern Virginia Open. That's a good question. I'm looking up the date. Oops. It's this weekend. That's a really good question. It's tough because Ohio State's playing Michigan State. I might play in it. Sunday could be tricky. I might have to take a bye. I'll look at it. I might play. Salty, you going to be there? I'm at the end. It's 12:48. I got 12 minutes ahead of schedule. What do you mean, Salty, you're going to be there to watch? Why aren't you playing? Vinyl asks a really good question. How do you guys email me? I'm not going to tell you. Oh, it's easy to figure out. Curious mind, you're more than welcome. Stack Java, I don't know that I agree with that. This wasn't directed at me, but I'm just going to jump in. I couldn't have retired early without a strong dividend portfolio. You may have invested in great companies that happen to pay a dividend, and they've done very well for you. I know I have. But if you've watched any of my videos, I think we can tend to overvalue dividends. That's just my 2 cents. Salty, you're not booked up, neither am I. Well, Sridhar, and I'm sure I butchered that name, when do you plan to release your new book on investing in retirement? I don't know. I just have not had time to work on it lately. So, it would be wonderful if it could be next year. That book, to do it right, is a lot of work. a lot of work. So I just don't know. All right. Well, since we got done early, I will do a few chess problems. I was trying to get to 3,000 on my problem rating. By the way, here's the chess tournament. I love chess websites like local organizations. Wow. So here, yeah, I might play in this. I would be, let's see, I would be in the this one right here, because 1,800 to 2,000 is considered Class A. I might have to take one buy on Sunday, but that's okay. Yeah, I think I might play. All right. So I got my blitz rating. Let's see if I can look it up here. Yeah, my highest puzzle rating is 2991. I was this close to 3,000 earlier today. My blitz rating is 2039, which is, I think, about the highest it's been. And I can tell you the reason. I get slow though. The reason is because of just doing combination after combination after combination. I've been doing a lot of, I'll show you what I've been doing. This is when people tend to leave the chat who are like, what? I thought this was a finance show. I do this game where you play Puzzle Rush. You try to get as many puzzles done in 5 minutes. And it's funny, I normally play on my PC, which is a heck of a lot faster than my Apple. And so now that I'm playing here, it feels so clunky and slow. Anyway, this is what you do. And the puzzles get harder. These first ones are usually pretty easy, although I have been known to miss them. And could very well, miss one here. Some of these are just patterns that over time you recognize. And then, of course, as you get further and further into this, the patterns get much more complicated, of course. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fun. So like, here's one, like it's not immediately obvious to me. I can check them. I guess I can win the bishop, right? Because I check here and then come down here and then win the bishop. But you can see they get more and more complicated. But this is, I don't know, this is how I spend my retirement. What can I tell you? I should be writing that retirement book instead. This is the same pattern we've already seen a couple of times in the puzzles they've given us. Are you guys keeping up? I can't watch the chat when I'm doing this. So, no. So here's a good one. Oh, wait a minute. I can win the queen, right? Yeah. Can I just do a checkmatey? There we go. I can probably push him back and then take the rook. Oh, I can just go here, and then he can't do that. Well, I can check here. Is that? There we go. And we go here, and then he goes into the corner, and we checkmate him. I think we can. This is an intro. I'll slow down for a second. So my first thought is taking this rook, or but I think the answer is actually checkmate, right? I think you do that. That's what they try to trick you. They show you something that looks juicy, a good move maybe, and then it just turns out to be totally wrong. I'm guessing I do that. Yeah, and then I think I go here, and then I can drop down here, and then there. So I'm not looking at the chat. So when I finally do, there'll probably be absolutely no one still watching the show. Does that make sense? I can go in here, I guess, yeah, because I either get checkmate or win the bishop, right? I think I do that, yeah. Yeah, maybe this. Come over here, and then come up there. We'll go back to the normal puzzles. I'm just going to finish this, quickly, maybe, hopefully. Can I check them? Yeah, because then I can win the rook, and then I also protect against the queen. Can I just go here? We're up to 26, a minute 24 left. I don't know, my record is like 37 or something. I don't know. Maybe that. And then this. Oh, that was stupid. If you miss, whoops, if you miss 3, by the way, then you're done. Maybe that. This is not obvious. To me, anyway. Well, maybe I can do that, right? And then come here, and then go here. I don't know, this. I can win both pawns. I'll just do it. Yeah, it's wrong. Wrong. I think it's this. So here, I think you got to do that first. I don't know. Maybe this. Okay. Anyone still watching? There's 126 of you still here. All right. I went silent. You're probably wondering what I'm doing. I'm looking at my phone. So I got 29. That's not too bad. And then you can look at the ones you missed, which is important, right? And you can replay them. So this one, I think I don't know what I was thinking. It's here and then there. I move my queen here, and of course, queen takes queen, ends that. And this one, what did I miss? Can't take there. If I go down here, that doesn't make any sense. I don't know. Do I just do that? Because then I do that. That's a tricky one. That's a tricky one. That's, to me, not obvious. All right. I'll let you guys solve this one while I check my messages. Oh, look, I wasn't even showing you the board. Anyway. So if some have just joined recently and you're thinking, I thought this was a wealth and investing show, that part of the show's over. When we're done recording, I'll go back and add timestamps. We went almost 2 hours. Now we're looking at chess puzzles because this is what we do at the end. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. Now look at this, my rating right there. I want to go over 3,000. I'm counting on you guys. So my first thought is knight f7, right? Which is a discovered check. He can't escape here because of the queen. If he takes, I come down here, check. He can't go here because of the bishop. If he goes here, I don't have the rook because of this bishop. But what do I have? I don't know. Maybe that's the wrong move. Maybe it's knight here, check. He can't take it because the bishop, he's got to go here, that's it. It's that, right? Oh, the pawn move, doesn't matter. 2983, did you guys have the same answer? Oh, Woodio thinks I need to close some browser tabs. I can't, those are all links I'll add to below the video. After the video, after we're done. You know, all the resources. All right, 20. If we get to 3, I'm going to keep playing until I either get to 3,000 or I fall below 2050 or 2950. So it's white to move. So here's the interesting idea. If I move my king up here, I can actually play rook here. Of course, you see pawn takes rook, but then I check and I queen. So that's my idea. I go here, I check, and I queen and mate. 29.94. I got 11 points on that one. Holy cow. I mean, if we get the next one, that could be it. Because once I get to 3,000, I'm done playing. Who wants to lose that score? I'm just kidding about that last part, but I'm almost afraid to hit the next button. Here we go. What was the rating on that? So they give each puzzle an individual rating. You probably can't see that. It's 2710. Sometimes the ratings make sense, sometimes they don't. By the way, you know, like the highest rated player, you know that the championship is coming up, right? Nepo is playing Magnus Carlsen. Carlsen is the highest rated player in the world at like 2870 or something. But these numbers, they don't have any relationship to that. At least not in any meaningful sense. Anyway, here we go. Okay, so here, this kind of problem, the trick is always, how can you queen your pawn here if you can, without the knight capturing it, right? The pawn push has to be the only, I mean, I can't imagine there's any other move for white but pushing the pawn. Let's say knight goes here, you push again, no, you'd queen. The king can't catch it. There's a square rule of the square. The king has to enter the square of the pawn in relation to the queening square. So there are four squares, so you have this square here, but white gets to move, so when white moves, the square is shorter. It's these 9 squares. For the king to stop the pawn, it's got to be able to enter that zone in the next move. And of course, it can't. It's 1 square too far away. So you got to rely on the knight. But maybe the knight goes here instead. I go here. He goes, no, he can't. So he can't check me. I don't know. I see. So here's the deal. If I move here, he's going to go here and check me, I think. But he still can't stop the queening. Oh, but he can move back and check me. And if I move here, he can check me. He can move there. I'm still, so here. This is the tricky part. If I simply go back, he checks me again and I don't make any progress. I've got to move to one side. The question is which side? Because if I move here and he moves there and then I queen, he checks me. I move here, he checks me. I move there, he checks me with queen. That is not good. That is bad. What if I go here? He doesn't want to keep his king on this diagonal, so he could check me. No, well, boy, that's tricky. What do you guys think? Well, I'll queen with check, maybe. I can't now. I got to move my king out of the way. I wonder if I move back, he checks me, and then I move over. I wonder if that's it. Because if he moves his king up, I check, I queen, he then checks me with the pawn, I take the knight, he queens, but I can check him, take the queen, and then here, 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 here. Okay, I think I've got it. Whew. I could be wrong, though. I'm afraid to move the piece. I'm looking at the chat. Salty says it could be a draw puzzle. It could be. I'm going to go here. Oh, brutal. Just brutal. So then it's going to be one, and it's over here. This has got to be queen, right? That's it? You stop the puzzle there? All right. Now I'm not happy. That looks so simple. He can't queen now. He's got to make an extra move. And then, of course, I've got checks. Oh, this is why you don't get to 3,000. See, I lost how many? I'm 2989. Well, I can check him here. If he pushes, I win the night. Or I actually check him here. He can't move here with the king because I would win the rook and checkmate him. He could go here. But then I can take this pawn with my bishop check. If he takes, I win the rook. I don't know. This seems like a good starting spot. That's what he did. The question is, do I have some sort of checkmate? But I don't think I do. What's the material? We each have 2 rooks. I'm down a piece. I don't see anything better. The obvious answer is to take the rook. I'm just looking to see. I don't have any meaningful checks with the knight. I don't have any checks with the queen. I can check him here. Does that do anything for me? I don't think so. I thought it was over. Well, I can check him here. And then I can pin the knight. Does that help me? I think it does. All right. Just checking the chat. We're down to 99 people. People gave up on us. I still want to get to 3,000. Check. Check. He goes there. No, he can't go there. Check. Check. Oh. So it seems like that would be the right first move. He goes here. I bring the queen down. He can't interpose with the bishop because I'd win the queen for the rook. But he could just drop back, and this square is covered with the bishop. And we're doing it. Oh, brutal. Just brutal. I didn't even consider that check. Did not even consider it. Well, we're going backwards. Did you guys have the right answer? I don't know. I don't see many moves being typed into the chat, and there's still a lot of you watching. I need your help. Well, the first thought is to push the pawn. Of course, his king's going to move over. But then I'm thinking, well, actually, if I put my king here, the threat is pushing the pawn. The king can't move over because I'll take the bishop. So the bishop is going to have to move. And then I can win this pawn. So what we're going to do. Sometimes you just got to be decisive, even if you're wrong. I'm wrong. Wrong. It's that first, and that's not even it. Huh. I guess I do have to worry about this guy, don't I? Yeah, that would actually be a problem. Hmm. Wow. Do you do that to begin with, and then this? Yeah, see, I knew that was going to be a problem, but that's easy to solve. I think I'm heading close to 2950 when I'm going to call it quits because I've lost too many points. All right. Well, he's got checkmate in two, so I got to be concerned about that. Oh, wait a minute. I think I just go here. I got my own checkmate. Here it is. All right. I think I just do that. All right. We're moving on up, as the theme song says, to what was a great show. Well, it seems like a simple thing to win the night, but I'm already down two pieces, so I probably need to think about checkmating. So I start with taking this pawn. He moves here. I check with the rook. He moves his bishop here. I take it. He takes it. I don't know. Oh, I wonder if I threaten it first. No. That's it? Really? Huh, that one was tough. See, I just can't quite get to 3,000. Leslie actually asked a finance question. I have 3,000 in my to pay on my house, and another 250,000 I want to take over from the bank financial advisor, not touching 300,000. What would be good for 250,000? Let me read that again. Well, the first thing I would do, Leslie, if I were in your situation, is well, what's the 254? Is it for retirements or long term? Do you have other specific goals for the money? And if it's retirements or long term, you said you're 60 and you're from Ohio, so I do have to say IO in response to your OH. I would invest it however you invest in your retirement money. Assuming you've got a well diversified, low cost sort of index portfolio. With factoring in that you presumably will start spending some of this money in the not too distant future. That's sort of been my approach. Pretty straightforward, nothing fancy. Just like Ohio. If you're from Ohio, you know what is knee high by the 4th of July. Anyone know what's knee high by the 4th of July? So the deal here is black. I'm just trying not to lose. And if I can trap the king in the corner, I won't lose. But that's not so easy. So the first thing I can do is move here. He moves down. I move here. He's got a problem with his king. He takes the pawn. I take his pawn. I don't know if it matters which square I go to. That's the interesting thing. It must matter, though. He's probably going to push that pawn, but I think it's here. And the reason I think it's there is because I think the next move is here. And then the next move, I think, is here. Boom, boom. That's one of the tricky, I love king and pawn endgames, but that's visually, it can be a very tricky thing to start moving your king all the way over here to the middle of the board. The thing is to keep in mind with chess is, normally you think the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. That's true, but not in chess. If I want to get to this square G8 down here, well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moves. It's also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moves. Not exactly a straight line, but you get to the same spot. And the key here is you want to outflank this white king so that when he starts to move in, you can do this. And here he can't make any further progress, right? Because his only move is this, and I'll just do this. And if he advances his pawn, then that's a stalemate because white can't move. And by the way, if we go all the way back, when I did this, if he instead decided to go right for my pawn and take it, I'll just move here. And now whatever he does, I'm going to take the pawn because he can't go here or here. So he'll presumably take it. But even if I guess he went here for some reason, either way, and you'd have a stalemate. All right, 29.78. So Leslie has a follow-up. Should I invest more aggressively since I'm sitting on 300,000? Well, again, it depends on what you're going to do on that 300,000. If it's pay off your home and you plan to use it for that at some point, maybe not now, but at some point, then you got to ask yourself how long you're going to have that sort of safety net. If it's there permanently, you're going to just keep it, maybe, I don't know, pay down the house. This is why, you really got to think about all the different factors going on in your life. But if it's in cash now, I would, and you plan to keep it there. You're not going to use it for something in the foreseeable future. Then I would look at that as just part of my overall asset allocation. Maybe that's part of your bond portfolio, even if it's in a savings account. But there's a lot of factors to consider, and it might be worth, given that you're in the retirement age and nearing that time, just on a fixed fee basis, talk to a financial advisor. Let them do a financial plan for you. I use Mark Zorl at Plan Vision. He's very inexpensive. I don't have any, as I've said many times, I don't have any financial relationship with him at all, but there are plenty of good options, and it may be worth just spending a little bit of money and the peace of mind that comes with it to have someone look at your entire, financial situation and your goals, to come up with a plan. All right. Well, I can't take the rook, or it's checkmate in 2. I can't move this rook over to attack the situation, or it's checkmate in 1. I can't take this pawn, or it's checkmate in 2. What can I do? My queen can't go here. I don't think it can go here. or there. This is tricky. I don't have any meaningful checks. I can move my queen here, but that seems less than ideal. I could push this pawn, threatening check. Of course, he would presumably take, and I could take with check, and then exchange the queens, and then I do have an exchange, rook for a bishop. The only thing I see, it's like it just eliminated all the other possibilities. I don't know, and it's wrong. It's wrong. What am I missing? What's the chat say? D4. Yeah, salty. You and I were thinking alike. I wonder if it's just queen here threatening, not because now I threaten this. I mean, I'd love to liquidate everything. Nope, that ain't it either. This is a tricky one. The good news is once you miss it, you don't lose more points for guessing wrong after that. So I got that going for me. I don't know. I'm going to go for a hint. It's moving the rook. Well, the only place I can see that would make sense is this. Because then I could, well, I was going to say I could do that. I can't take the rook. That would be bad. Wait a minute. Oh, yes, I can. Take it this way. No. What? It's not that. I can't take it here. Huh. I was looking at something else. I was assuming, oh, he goes here. And he gets out of it. Ah. All right. Well, what did my rating end up coming at? 29.66. I think I'm going to have to call it a day. Happy travels. I'll check out the SNL skit. I don't know that I have seen it. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show. I'm exhausted. What time is it? 1:23. I will get timestamps up on the video sometime today. And great questions. Thanks for joining. I hope you have a great week. And until next time, remember, best thing money can buy is financial freedom. That allows you to just sit around all day and talk to people on YouTube who can't talk back, which is kind of nice, actually. And play chess. I'm out. Later.